Greetings everyone, and thank you for joining me yet again. This lesson is going to cover a few things that we've probably just barely touched on here and there throughout the course that are all related to our add-on charges and fees. The fees that we'll cover are our surcharges, service charges, and handling fees, which collectively make up a collection of feature sets that, even though they sound somewhat familiar and may seem to have some overlapping functionality, they are all designed to have separate functions and purposes within the system. So what better way to begin than by doing a classic compare and contrast of the three charges or fees or payment add-ons or whatever we want to classify them as, and we'll explain and define those and so on. Then we'll get into their configuration so we can see exactly how each of them are set up and multiple different ways that some of these can be set up. Some of them do have multiple setup pieces, different ways that they can be implemented and administered, and we'll see all of those. And while we run through the setups of each one, we'll take a look at some demonstrations in SmartPOS of these being used after they've been configured. Now I know the title of this lesson includes the word tips. Well, the tips portion will sort of be integrated through different parts here or there while we discuss the others, since they are related, but most of the tip specific settings that we've actually seen them in the past when we went through table service. And as for the pricing schedule, that's also in the lesson name. That's something that I believe we very briefly looked at in a previous lesson, but regardless, the pricing schedule is relatively straightforward, so we won't need to spend too much time on it. We will actually get into it while we are looking at service charges a bit later on in the lesson. In fact, this should be a relatively quick lesson overall, but I know I've said that before and it hasn't been, so let's just get into it. Cool, now the beginning of this lesson might look a bit different than most of the others that we've done. I've got some slides and visual aids that I've used for similar training sessions in the past, so it's always good to be able to recycle these types of things. But anyway, we've got an insightful quote here from Stephen Hawking to help highlight that while we'll be looking at some overlapping ideas and concepts today, each one, as I said, does have multiple configuration options available. As a matter of fact, in addition to what we will see today, there are more options to some of the features than we'll be able to get into. In fact, I'm sure from what we will see today and from your own experiences that you could come up with your own alternative implementations of everything. Because as we've seen in the past throughout this course, there is no right or wrong way to do and set up some of these things necessarily, and oftentimes there are multiple ways that these components can be used and implemented. An implementation that's right for one venue might not be right for the next one, and vice versa. But with a bit of product knowledge, which we have at this point, we can help select the correct roads to take, so to speak, so that each venue can have the best outcome for what you're attempting to achieve when it does come to these topics. So focusing on these fees and charges, let's break each of these down a little bit further. After all, the terms surcharge, handling fee, and service charge are sometimes used somewhat interchangeably, and their meanings are also a bit similar, although how one person thinks of these might be different compared to the next person. But in BPOS, of course, we do have specific uses for each of these. Now, surcharges and handling fees in particular are terms that are often used in relation to card payments, and they're similar in their usage when applying add-on costs to certain payment methods. For example, some financial institutions use the term surcharges when they're talking about applying a fee that's based on the payment type that's being used. But in BPOS, we mostly use the term handling fee for fees that are applied to our credit card and FPOS payments. More on those later in the lesson though. Let's leave handling fees alone for the time being. Actually, we'll stick with more of a worldview of surcharges for now, and we'll get into each of these three separately. So for surcharges, the basic dictionary definition is simply that they are an additional charge or payment. Although a quick Google search will reveal several other definitions and meanings that elaborate on that. This explanation here from Investopedia.com seems to fit pretty well for our purposes. It's stating that a surcharge is a fee, charge, or tax added, but may not be included in the stated price of a good or service. I'm sure we've all experienced getting hit with these types of surcharges before. Sometimes they can be unexpected and can significantly increase the final cost of goods or services. Now, thinking of how surcharges are used specifically in BPOS, they are a form of price adjustment, which can be used for any number of reasons that a venue might want to tack on some additional fee to a transaction. Now, surcharges are often applied on a case-by-case basis or some one-off scenarios, but some examples could include instances such as having something like a private bartender for a group function, or having extra wait staff assigned to a party or event, or something similar to that. And contrary to service charges and handling fees, which both have manual and automatic options for setup and application, which we'll see later in the lesson, we can only apply surcharges manually to a transaction using a till function button. We will run through the setups and demo a little later, but the order surcharge till function is what it's called, and we can use that to simply add a percentage of the transaction amount as an extra fee on top of the transaction balance. But that really sums up surcharges in BPOS. Pretty simple, but like I said, we'll check out a demo after we get through these other explanations here. Now, service charges are quite similar to surcharges in that they're another form of a price adjustment, but in addition to having the ability to apply them manually using a till function button, they can also be set up in the system to be applied automatically. How we can do that? There's a couple different ways we can do that. One of them is by using what's called a pricing schedule, which I mentioned a couple minutes ago that we'd see that while we are looking at the service charge setups. And for that, a service charge can be applied or can be set to apply to all of the transactions during the scheduled time period. One of the more common use cases for service charges, at least here in Australia, would be on things like Sundays and public holidays to help offset the additional labor costs that are incurred due to penalty rates that are paid to hourly staff on those days, and we can implement scheduled service charges on those days. Now, service charges can also be applied automatically based on the number of guests that are at a table, and we'll get into those setup options momentarily too. Then we have our handling fees, which outside of BPOS, these might typically be charged to a customer based on top of an order's subtotal. So one example, which is not hospitality related or could be retail related, would be something like including a handling fee with the shipping fee, where the handling fee amount, what's paid towards the handling fee, goes towards covering things like the cost of fulfillment and warehousing and packaging and so forth for a product. However, in BPOS, handling fees are associated with our credit card and FPOS payments, as I mentioned at the start. So for those, we can add specific handling fee percentages to each individual card type. Automatic handling fees can also be set up for integrated FPOS devices. So if you've got those, we can set those up automatically. And we do have a manual handling fee option where we can add them using a till function button, which can be either a preset amount or a preset percentage. And lastly, regarding handling fees, as of version 4614, when handling fees are in use, we can assign a handling fee product in global settings so that we can report on them in the product summaries report. We've seen in the past the proxy product that is created with new databases for this, and we'll see today where that is assigned as the handling fee product at the global level, which I believe we've looked at in the past, but we will refresh our memories on that today. Cool, and that brings us to tips, which we haven't really mentioned yet, aside from at the very start when I mentioned that they were going to be covered, scattered throughout. So they are somewhat related to these other fees and charges, even though they are quite a bit different to the other ones. So tips, at least in the context that we are using them, using the term, they are a sum of money that's given to someone as a reward for a service, is one way to think of it, or one definition. So rather than a fee or a charge that the venue is enforcing, which the other three are, tips are something that in most cases the customer can decide to pay and also determine how much they would like the tip amount to be. In fact, it can be helpful to think of the main difference between tips and the others being that the others are paid to the venue, whereas tips go to the staff as a form of additional payment to them. It may not be straight to the waitstaff though. Tips might be collected by the venue and then paid out to staff depending on the venue's policies and procedures. But anyway, in BPOS we do facilitate a full range of tip-related functions, which we've seen the setups for in the past. So firstly, collecting tips, whether they're preset or entered manually, and whether they're collected as cash or from a card. And then also tip declaration and tip payouts are also supported. But like I said earlier, we won't be covering any specific examples or demonstrations regarding tips in this lesson, but I did still want to mention tips today because they're sometimes grouped in with surcharges, service charges, and handling fees when we're thinking about add-on payments that are not part of the normal price of goods and services. Okay, no smooth segue here. Let's jump into back office and we'll start going through the setups, starting with surcharges. Okay, so first up, we will start here in our till function map to go over surcharges. Now, surcharge configurations are really very simple, probably the easiest of these charges to set up. And as I said earlier, there's only one way to apply surcharges, which is manually through the use of a till function button. More specifically, it is an order surcharge till function. I just so happen to have one here on my pricing panel. It's this one that I've selected here, which is labeled 10% order surcharge. And the configurations for it are truly dead simple. We can preset a surcharge percentage using the item field so that it's at a fixed percent. Just note that this is set by the hundredths, so the 1,000 that's entered here is going to equate to the 10% surcharge. Now, alternatively, we could opt to leave that at 0, in which case operators would be able to enter the percentage manually from the till. Totally up to you how you'd like to set that up. And then if we look at the key field down here, we can use that to designate which discount totalizer the charges will report to. Just remember the discount totalizers are discount and surcharge totalizers. And it should go without saying that we can always set up multiple iterations of this particular till function, so each one could have a different preset percentage and things like that if we would like to. Now, since surcharges can only be manually added to transactions using this till function, they would typically be used for one-off scenarios. But in saying that, each venue that implements surcharges is probably going to have some policy in place for the basis or reasoning of adding one. It's not just going to be, willy-nilly add a surcharge whenever you feel like it. It could be used for some special events or where extra staff is required to cover a table or event or party or something like that. Plenty of use cases out there since this is essentially open-ended on how we can implement this. And we'll see later how surcharges will report in the system. But for now, if we do jump over to SmartPOS quickly, we will see just how easy it is to apply a surcharge to a transaction. Alright, so I've got some food and drinks here added to this transaction. By the way, this can be applied to any type of transaction, whether it be a table sale, non-table sale, etc. In this case, I've just got a standard non-table retail transaction going here for this demo. But if I head to the pricing panel, of course, again, I should remind you that you can place an order surcharge till function button wherever you'd like to. But yeah, applying the surcharge is going to be as easy as tapping that button. And just like that, that 10% surcharge is added to the transaction. So pretty simple stuff there. I will close this transaction. Let's just do this one to cash. And then when we get into reporting at the end of the lesson, we'll see how that $8.80 from that order surcharge amount is going to show in our reports. But for now, we will get back into back office and we'll get into our service charges. There's a bit more involved for those than a single till function. So when it comes to service charges, as I mentioned earlier, we do have multiple options for how they can be implemented, both manually and automatically, depending on how we configure and set things up in the system. So firstly, for a manual service charge, we're already here on our till function map, and they can be applied using a till function that is called service charge set. We've got one here that's labeled add 25% service charge. So this is somewhat similar to the order surcharge function and how we can preset a percentage, but there are some added options using the sub item field here too. So just as with the surcharge one, we can enter a preset percentage in the item field, or we could put 0 here and let operators choose a percentage. I think more often than not, the service charge is going to be preset within the till function. In this case, 25%. Again, it is set by the hundredths. And then using the sub item field, we can configure a couple things here. We can enter 1 to have it remove a service charge. What that means is that we could set 2 of these up on the same panel, or at least within till function map. And 1 could be to add a service charge, 1 could be to remove the service charge. That way we can manually toggle service charges on and off if we'd like to. And we do have another option here where we can opt to hide the confirmation prompts when we are setting and turning off the service charge. Now, as I've been on the screen, you might have also noticed this toggle auto service charge button here. What this does is it gives operators the ability to turn automatic service charges on and off from the till, but we will get into the setups for those automatic service charges momentarily, and then we'll see that in use a bit later. Just notice that while we're here for now, that this only has the one configuration option to hide the confirmation prompt, so nothing too much to set for this one. Now, before we get into our automatic service charge setups, we will just jump back over into SmartPOS and we'll see this manual option in action for adding a 25% service charge. Alright, so very simple but slightly different workflow as compared to the surcharge till function. So I've got a table transaction going here. I don't have any products added onto it yet, that's important to note. But as with the surcharges, service charges can be added really to any type of transaction. But I do think that more common use cases involve table service. So here we are with the table active. But anyway, here on with the pricing panel active already, if I just give that a tap, we're going to get a prompt here notifying us that we've selected to set the service charge to 25% for this table. Now that is because we did not have the option turned on to hide the confirmation prompt. And another confirmation here, and select that, it has been added. And now if I go ahead and add some products to this table transaction, we will be able to see that that 25% service charge is being added here. Now just keep in mind, again, that we could have a second button available, which is configured to remove the charge from the transaction if we would like to give operators that option after they've applied it. Now, one other thing I do want to show you with this is if we save the table and then we go ahead and reopen it, and we add some additional products to it, maybe just a couple of drinks here. Notice that as I add more products to that, the service charge is going to continue to accrue based on the sales prices that have been entered, and that service charge will continue to increase. Now that same thing would happen for the surcharge too, by the way. I just didn't show that earlier, but thought I might show it now. Cool, what I'll do here is I'll just pay for this one, and that way when we look at some reporting later, we will be able to see this $22.15 service charge included. Cool, now let's head back to back office again. We'll have a look at how to set up some automatic service charges in a few different ways. For the first way, if we go to our venue settings, we have this section here, which you may have seen in the past, called Service Charge Setup. Now this is going to be collapsed by default, but we can just click to open that up and we can then configure what we need to. Now there's a few different things going on here, but the main functionality of this is to configure that when a minimum number of guests are seated at a table in the venue, the service charge percentage that's set here is going to be added automatically. So let's say that here at No Hats, No Stars, we have a policy which is maybe plastered all over the place. Maybe it's written in really small fine print somewhere, but regardless, the policy is that for any tables of 6 or more, that they will incur a 15% service charge. Cool. So easy as that to set that up. Now, as for the other things that we can configure here, we can name our service charge, which is what we'll show in SmartPause and on reports. By default, it's just going to be called service charge, which we'll leave alone, but you might want to change that to rename it to something different in your database. Then we can also set the service charge tax, which determines when the service charge is going to be applied in respect to any add-on taxes. So will the service charge tax be the same as any add-on tax, or will the service charge be applied before or after the add-on tax? No right or wrong for this. Well, maybe there is a right or wrong for this depending on tax laws and things where you are, but we do give you the option regardless, so that you can set that per venue. In our case, I'll just leave that as same as add-on tax. And then moving down to the flags, we have this move service charge to tip. So this flag, if it's on, any service charges will then be allocated as tips when the transactions are closed. So that may be in place in venues where table service is used, and the automatic service charges that are collected should actually go to waitstaff as tips. Then below that, we have our maintain service charge on product sold. So this actually references how to handle service charges for recalled transactions. Now, we have not gone over recalling tables or recalling transactions in this course, but we do have the ability, it's through a manager till function, to recall transactions that have been closed. So if this flag is on, products that have been sold with a service charge in a transaction that's been closed and then recalled will retain the original service charge. But if new products are then added to that recalled transaction, they would use the current service charge at the time of the recall. That is, if it's different at the time of the recall. But if this flag is off, then all service charges, even the ones from before the transaction was originally closed, will be changed to the current service charge rate. Cool, and then lastly, we have these three: account, table, and auto percent service charge overrides price schedule. So they're all labeled a bit similar there. If any of these are on and there's an active service charge based on a pricing schedule, it will be overridden. We'll check out pricing schedules in just a second. But for example, this bottom flag here is referring to our automatic service charge that's set up here. At the moment, this 15% for tables of 6 or more. If there's then an active pricing schedule that maybe sets let's say a 20% service charge to all transactions, maybe it's a public holiday and we've set up a pricing schedule to implement a 20% service charge for all transactions, we could then turn this flag on to override the pricing schedule's 20% and still apply this 15% to tables of 6 or more, even though that's less. Or we could leave the flag off, and then the pricing schedule's 20% would apply instead of this 15%. So let's check out an example where I leave this flag off. Let me just go ahead and save this. And if we go to pricing schedules, which is going to be in the operational menu, and if we scroll down a bit, they are going to be all the way at the bottom. So just a quick rundown of what these are. If I add a scheduled pricing, we can see there isn't really much to it, and there is a nice little description at the top here. A pricing schedule allows for creating changes to service charges and price numbers at a specified date and time in the future. Always ensure to create a second pricing schedule with the reset to default flag turned on to ensure that normal pricing resumes. So pretty straightforward, but also some powerful functionality from this with being able to do that. So we can filter a pricing schedule to apply to a specific venue or store if we'd like to, then just set the date and time. So a normal use case would be to set these up maybe days or weeks in advance, but for our demo, I'll just leave it set to right now so that it will be active straight away. And then we select our pricing schedule type. We've got either service charge or price number. If I select price number, we will then be able to select one of the system's defined price numbers that will apply again to all transactions when the price schedule is active. But we are looking at service charges today, of course. So with that selected, we can then set our percentage down here. And let's go with that example that I mentioned a minute ago, and we'll set that to 20%. And just to reiterate, we will need to create a second pricing schedule with this reset to default flag turned on to make sure that we return to the system defaults. But at the moment, I will just save this, and we can see that we now have that currently live, which is going to apply a 20% service charge to all transactions. So again, obvious use case for this is that we've got it scheduled for a public holiday or a Sunday or something like that, where we have some increased labor cost on those days, and we would like to try to offset that by implementing a service charge. Now don't forget that even though we've got that 15% service charge that's set up at the venue level for parties of 6 or more, because we have that override flag turned off right now, the pricing schedule service charge that we've just set up here is what is going to be followed regardless. So if I pull up SmartPOS and I start ringing up some products, even for a retail transaction here, that 20% service charge is being applied automatically due to that active price schedule. Now if I cancel that and let's start another table, and we'll set the guest count lower than 6 and then start adding some products here, we are still going to have that 20% service charge applied from the pricing schedule. Now if I cancel that and we'll start another table where the guest count is 6 or over, I'll just set that to 6. And now we start adding some products. The service charge is still 20% because I do not have the system set up to override a pricing schedule. But if I cancel that, jump back into back office and back to our venue settings and back to the service charge setup, and we turn that flag on, this 15% service charge should now override that 20% that's scheduled, even though it is lower. So let me save that and then pull up SmartPOS again. And I will do another table of 6 or more. Let's go with 7 this time, why not? Now, in this case, even before adding any products, we can see that the service charge has been set to 15%, again, due to those venue settings. And sure enough, if we start adding some products now, the service charge is going to be that 15%. It's going to override the pricing schedule service charge, and it's going to apply the 15% instead. Now, the other thing that I want to show you while we're here is this toggle auto service charge till function. So if I try to use it now in a transaction that already has some products added to it, I will not be able to. But if I cancel that and we start again, I'll do another table. We'll just go with 6 this time. I've got that set. Now that has been triggered automatically again. Now before adding any products, we would need to go into our wherever we've got that till function kept, and if we give that a tap now, we will be able to remove that automatic service charge from that from this table. We can see that has been set to 0. Or is it? Now under normal circumstances, it would be that. But since we do have the pricing schedule active right now, if I start to add some products to this table, that 20% service charge is still going to apply from our scheduled pricing. So a lot of different use cases and scenarios that could be encountered and catered for with these service charge settings. But yeah, it just depends on how you'd like to set them up in your database. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and save, or I'll close this transaction. Oh, I need to reopen that. Meant to pay for that, not close it. Go ahead and pay for that, and that way we'll have an additional $16.16 service charge added to our reporting when we take a look at those later. Cool. Now if we go back to our venue settings, we can, if we go back to our service charge setup, we can do the same thing that we saw there to override a pricing schedule if there are any either account-based or table-based service charges that have been applied, either if they've been applied manually or via a price number that's been assigned to an account. So we've seen in the past how we can set those things up. But we will skip demos for those. I think we've spent enough time on these types of automatic service charges, and we do have another to get to still. In fact, the other automatic service charge that we can set up is right here in venue maintenance. It's going to be over on the names tab and within this price name section, where we can also base a service charge per price name. Now, there's a number of different use cases out there for implementing service charges using this method, especially given that we can define these price names for whatever we want. One might say that the possibilities are endless here. But one use case that we can demo for this would be a scenario where, let's say, a service charge is always applied to takeaway orders. So maybe here in No Hats, No Stars, we always apply a 5% service charge for takeaway orders. So I've got 5 price names left here that I can define in this database, and I might add one called takeaway. Now, like I said, maybe that has a 5% service charge. Now I will need to define, or I won't need to, I could use one of the discounts and surcharge totalizers that are already defined here, but I will define a separate bucket for these to go into. And I will assign that. Cool. Now, since that is price name based, what we could do then is, if I save that, we go to our product list. And I will just open whatever, but maybe I'll open something that makes some sort of sense. We'll go with, let's just go with some mozzarella sticks here. Now, if we come to our pricing settings tab, I'll make sure that I've got the correct store selected here that we're going to set this up for. And if we scroll over, we will now have our takeaway price name right here, and we can set its price mode. So what I'll do for this is I'll set its price mode to use base price, meaning that it will use the normal price. But since we have that 5% service charge set within for the price name, that will be applied for those products. So in addition, so it's going to, so that we don't need to maintain multiple prices for this. If, let's say, the normal price increases, we don't need to remember to go and update the takeaway price also. We can leave that. We can then use that base price and then tack on the 5% onto that. So what we could do then, if I save this and we head to our key map set, is we could then use that price name for a takeaway specific key map within the Tills key map set. For example, for the key map that's used by MyTill here, I can add a third key map. And we'll just do the food one, since that product that I just set up was food. And we will then set the price number for that to takeaway. That way, that same till can be used to sell both dine-in and takeaway while only applying that automatic service charge. Now again, that's based on the price number that's going to apply to the takeaway products. Now we've seen other instances and use cases throughout the course where we can set price numbers to be active for various purposes. In fact, we just saw a few minutes ago how we can use the scheduled pricing to set a price number to apply system-wide. Potentially certain table groups could always have a service charge applied. We've seen that in the past also. That could be a different way to what we've done here, where we could set up we could have a table group for pickup and delivery, and we've got a separate table group for that. We could then set a separate price number to always be applied for those. We can then also use the price redirect feature that we covered in the multi-store setup lesson. and we could set that up so that we do not need to admin multiple prices where we have price redirects that are in place. And by the way, I should have pointed this out while we were editing that product. That's okay, I'll just head back to that. We do have a flag, or we can turn on the flags here. We've got this option down here that says display service charge. If we turn that on, we will have a column added up here that's labeled no service charge. What that'll do is that it gives us the ability to omit a certain product size, obviously per store. These are store pricing settings here, so we might change that to our main restaurant. And this is probably not a great example because there's only one size for this product. But if we pretend that this is a product with multiple sizes, there may be some scenarios where a specific product size should not incur a service charge when service charges are being applied to the rest of the transaction. Whether they are automatic or manual, we can select a specific product size to never include a service charge. Okay, that is our service charges done and dusted, so just one add-on fee to go is going to be our handling fees. And for handling fees, there are another one that has multiple setup options, but one of them, if we head back to our function map, is using a till function button. I've got one in our database here. I think this is this one labeled $5 handling fee. This is an add handling fee till function. So I've got this configured to just add a $5 flat amount. However, there are a couple things that I should point out with this. Firstly, whereas, like I said, for this one, I'm using the item field to preset a handling fee amount, we could alternatively use the sub-item field down here to set a percentage instead. And on that, if for whatever reason both of those have been set, if someone's made a mistake there, the amount will always override the percentage. It is also important to note that if neither of these are set up, if we don't preset an amount or a percentage, we will have a manual option for the operators at the till where they will be prompted, but they will only be prompted to enter an amount. So if neither of these are set, it will be manual for operators, but only for an amount, not for a percentage. But yeah, that's that. But yeah, aside from being able to apply a manual handling fee using this till function, if we head back to our venue maintenance and we go to our names tab again, we also have an automatic handling fee percentage that we can assign to. We can assign individual handling fee percentages based on the card type that's being used. So we haven't gone over these in the past, but we can actually define credit card names here. We can define up to 16 of them. And for those, we have a couple of different options, but we'll focus on the handling fee percentage for today. But we can add a separate handling fee percentage for each one. So different ways to implement a handling fee depending on the venue and what's needed. As we saw a moment ago, we can add them manually using that till function button. But if, let's say for example, we incur a 3% handling fee for MasterCard, we can set that up here. Also, in the bottom right, we can define our handling fee name, which is going to appear in SmartPOS and when referenced in some reports. And down here, we can also assign a handling fee percentage for FPOS payments. What that means is that irrespective of the card type that's being used, whatever's set here is going to apply to all FPOS transactions. But cool, if I just save this with our 3% MasterCard fee added there. Lastly, regarding handling fees, there are a couple of configurations in global settings on the flags tab, and I alluded to these earlier. I've mentioned this previously. I believe in other lessons we've discussed the handling fee product, where here at the global level we can set our handling fee product, which handling fees will be mapped to, and that way they can be included on product reports like our product summaries, and we'll take a look at that in just a couple minutes. But yeah, this is similar to when we set up those proxy products for our membership products in the last lesson, except this is so that we can report on handling fee quantities and potentially handling fee amounts depending on how these flags are set up. Now, I believe I mentioned this before too, but I should mention it again. By default, since version 4614, I did mention this at the start of the lesson, but when a new database is created, the product group, which if I just open this product group called system product is going to be added, and this handling fee product, which we did see in the last lesson, is going to be added to this group, and that is going to be assigned here also. Now, I should mention also regarding this include handling fee flag. This is going to allow for adding tax onto handling fees in order to pay the correct and appropriate amount of tax. So when this flag is on, the handling fee product that's set is going to be used to calculate totals for reporting, which will affect the net total and the tax totals. And that is going to ensure that sales reports balance. By the way, while we're here, I should also mention that how these charges, all the charges that we've seen today, will depend on these flags here, which ones are on or off. Again, there's no right or wrong way, just depends on your venue's policies and potentially tax laws and implications and things like that in your region. I'm not here to give out any advice regarding those things, just to let you know that these options are here. But we can see that along with the include handling fee flag, we also have options to include service charges in the net total, and we can add discounts and surcharges that are set here. So these discount and surcharge totalizers, we can add those to the net total as well. But the reason I'm mentioning all of that is when we look at reports in a couple of minutes, these flags being off is going to factor into our sales reports. And if yours are set differently, just take that into account. Anyway, if I just save this and we pull up SmartPOS one last time, we'll run through a quick demo first on our handling fees. So I'll just add a few products here, and we will add that manual handling fee, that $5 one. There it is, added straight away to the transaction. Cool, we can see that service charge 20% is still active also. And what we'll do now is we'll just pay this with MasterCard, which remember is going to incur our 3% fee. So we're hit with a prompt there straight away that the handling fee applies, and we can see the percentage and the amount that's going to apply there. And we can see, by the way, just to be clear, that the full balance, the $96.20, which includes that 20% service charge and that $5 handling fee, is going to be included and have that 3% MasterCard fee applied on top of that, essentially compounding those there. But yeah, I will just go ahead and finish closing that off for us. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at some reports in back office before we finish up, we'll start with our till balance report. I display that. We will be able to see separate totals for each fee and charge type here. So we've got our surcharges, service charges, and handling fees. We can see their quantities and the amounts that have been paid into those. Now notice that they're listed out separate from our gross sales, as we would expect. And based on the global settings, those net total flags that we saw just a couple minutes ago, in this database, those were all off. These are all going to be excluded from the net total. They will, however, be included in the drawer total so that that money hopefully doesn't go wandering off. And if we go ahead and take a look at our period summary report, where those are going to show in the banking summary as their total monetary amount. So you might have noticed that there's a discrepancy here for the handling fee amount. Remember, that's mapped to a product, which in this database is set to incur retail tax. So on the till balance report, that tax amount is included within this GST line, whereas on the period summary report, this is simply reporting on the overall amount that's been collected, not separating out the tax there. Also, by the way, we can see the surcharge and service charges here in the sales summary section too. And lastly, if we'd like to report on that handling fee product specifically, we can do so within our product summaries report. And if we scroll down to where that product group is and we find that product, we can see it in here. Again, that's going to be, we can see the units that have been essentially sold for that. it's going to just show as 1 in our case, the 1 handling fee that we paid because that was combined together in that transaction, even though it was 2 separate handling fees, the one that we added manually and the one due to the MasterCard handling fee. They have been added and they're counted as 1 unit in the system. But again, since we are not including that in the net total in this database, it is going to be showing as 0 for our net total there. Alright, well, as we wrap up this lesson, this is probably as good a time as ever to remind you that nothing is perfect. What we've covered today is very much like other functionality in BPOS, where there's no right or wrong, better or worse way to do something necessarily. If we take our, let's say, our marketing and promotions component, for example, I'm sure that we could all take the feature set that we have and we could use it to configure a promotion. So we could have the same promotion that we're all configuring. The end result is going to be nearly identical, but in the system, maybe a few of us would set things up one way, a few others would set things up a different way, and others maybe slightly different altogether. I think you get the point. But the same principle can be applied not only to that, not only to the charges and fees that we've seen here today, but in many other scenarios and components in the system as well. Cool, but that will do it. Thank you as always for your time and attention, and we will see you next time.